fire, strumming along with our favorite lyre. Adventure called the quest awaits, your destiny's in the hands of the fates. But never fear, we're all friends here, we'll have your back when danger's near. Come with us through the pages as we unravel a tale for the ages into the Percy-Verse.
Hello and welcome to the Percy-Verse Podcast. I'm Alisa.
And I'm Anna. Grab your double cheeseburgers, fries, and milkshakes because today we're discussing The Lightning Thief, Chapter 11. We visit the Garden Gnome Emporium. So we fled a exploding bus. And we are in New Jersey, and we're having a special time going through some stinky bogs right now.
Yep. It made me think of this past weekend. I saw a local production of a musical called The Toxic Avenger, which is like based off of, I think, a movie from like the 80s or something like that, but it takes place in New Jersey, and the opening number is about like how New Jersey is just a place full of toxic waste. Like no one wants to be.
Oh man. Well, that is on full display here.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that. New Jersey just getting a bad rap.
Getting a bad rap. From anyone everyone. From New Jersey, we love you. You're okay. And hopefully you can find some humor in the representation that you seem to get a lot. And we're starting out with this paragraph that I really love that's about how actually it's nice to know there are Greek gods out there sometimes because you have someone to blame when things go wrong. Like, you're walking away from a bus that's just been attacked by monster hags and blown up by lightning, and it's raining. Of course it's raining on top of everything else because how could it not be raining? And, for some people that might be really bad luck. And when you're a half-blood, you know that some divine force really is trying to mess up your day. So I was like, all of us could just use that sometimes when we're having a really bad day, a really bad week. It's like, I can blame this on some god out there.
Like in our lives, we're always trying to find like, what can I blame this on that makes me feel better about,
many a couple's argument has started like that, I think.
And in this, it's like, no, you actually do have someone very specific.
Yeah.
Very specific.
Blame. How much can you do about it? Not too much, but at least you know that there are actually larger forces out there at work, specifically against you. In Percy's case, it's not just, the gods are out there, the monsters are out there. It's like, no, a lot of them are really targeting him specifically. Yeah. So
they've got one mission, and it's just essentially to like stop Percy Jackson.
Yeah. Yep. So they're walking along the woods, along the New Jersey riverbank, and the glow of New York City is making the sky yellow behind them, and the smell of the Hudson is reeking in their noses. So it's like this really lovely description until you get to that, and then you're like, oh gosh, okay, that's where we're at.
Yep, and because of the rain, Grover's shivering and braying, and he's still, I think, like shell-shocked from what just happened, because it says that his big goat eyes turned slit-pupiled and full of terror, and he was just saying 3 kindly ones, all 3 at once. Like, he's just very overwhelmed by what just happened. And Percy says that he is as well. The explosion of the bus windows is still ringing in his ears, but Annabeth is the one who's kind of taking charge in this moment and just telling everyone, like, come on, the further we get away, like, the better. We just gotta keep on going. And Percy very kind of quickly points out all of their money was back there, their food, their clothes, literally everything was in the bus that just blew up.
And speaking of blaming people.
Yes, and this is when Annabeth jumps in and says, well, maybe if you hadn't decided to jump into the fight. And Percy kind of gets a little defensive and goes, what do you want me to do? Let you get killed? And Annabeth is like, you didn't need to protect me, Percy. I would have been fine. And Grover just goes, sliced like sandwich bread, but fine. Because he's just like, I feel like Grover's like half here in that moment and half not. Yeah. He was enough to be like, to kind of throw in this like
He's the realist of the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And Annabeth just tells him to shut up, and he's like, tin cans, a perfectly good bag of tin cans.
Yeah.
But this is kind of, I think, an interesting moment. This chapter is the first time we really get to see the trio like together, tested, and like see what their dynamic is between the three of them. Also, we get a lot of like Percy and Annabeth, and kind of seeing their moments together, and so it starts off very tension filled, which I think makes sense coming off of this very stressful event that, you know, this group of 12-year-olds is not just like being super mature and just handling everything so well. Like, it makes sense that, you know, Annabeth snaps at Percy and blames him for them, you know, losing all their things, and that Grover's kind of still recovering and in shock from what just happened, and that they're not all like together in sync on the same page. And
when they kind of just formed the team, like they've only had a couple moments of working in unison.
Day one.
Yeah, like Annabeth starts out. It's still day one. Annabeth starts out kind of in opposition to Percy, like we were talking about last time, like really feeding off the Athena Poseidon tension and rivalry. And so I think, you know, it's going to take time. And it is interesting in this chapter where we kind of see like bonding and then falling apart and then bonding, then falling apart. And they kind of are teetering right now, figuring out their dynamic, figuring out their groove, and like going in and out of conflict, which I think it makes a lot of sense. And also being stranded in the middle of nowhere without any of the provisions you brought with you. Like we were even talking about how it didn't feel like enough that they were sent with, and now they don't have any of that. You know, so I feel like that's a really big deal.
Yeah, and they don't like even fully know 100% where they're going, you know, like they don't have like, you're headed to this address, and so as long as you like keep going on this path, you'll get there and everything will be fine. Like they're stranded with kind of only like a semi sense of direction.
There's
like
where
LA,
they're trying to end up. LA's
not
too big.
LA's not a massive sprawling city with millions of people. No.
Super easy.
So and it says they slosh through some more mushy ground, and after a few minutes, Annabeth falls into line next to Percy and goes, "Look, I appreciate your coming back for us, okay? That was really brave." And I love Percy's response of, we're a team, right? That, like, he just has this, like, immediate sense that, like, okay, the three of them are on a quest together, so they are a team. Like, they are a unit, they have each other's backs. Always that's just how it is, because they're on this quest together.
Yeah, I was really kind of tracking in this chapter, like, moments that each of them does or doesn't like take charge, and then how the others follow, right? And so like I feel like Annabeth has the most sort of like Half-Blood training experience, like Camp Half-Blood experience. Percy, it's his quest, so he's sort of like you would think he would be the sort of de facto leader of the quest, except that he's so inexperienced. And then Grover as a protector like has his own skill set and his own like reasons that you would want to listen to him, and his own like strengths. But also he has this insecurity where he doesn't believe in himself as much. And so other people also don't always follow him. And so I just, as we go through, maybe I'll like note moments, but it's interesting to watch them take charge in different moments through all these chapters that are coming up.
Totally.
And how the others respond, and then how that changes over time. Because like right now, you know, like you said, Annabeth is kind of like, we got it. The farther we get, the better. Right. And Percy has something to say about it. He's like, all of our stuff is back there. But he and Grover listen to Annabeth. Like a lot of the time, if Annabeth says something, you're going to listen, you know? And like, that's part of there. But then we're going to get to Grover, and we're not going to be listening to Grover in this chapter again, you know? And so it's interesting to watch those dynamics form over time.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about how it's interesting, you know, Annabeth kind of just like literally pulling them along, and then saying, come on, the farther away we get, the better, was making me think of like, well, when she was really little and kind of on the run with Luke and Talia, and then also when Grover found them, and so it was the four of them, that like she probably learned a lot of things, like, okay, as soon as you're able to run, you need to run as far as you can. But that despite like Grover, for not for the entire period of that time, but for a period of that time in Annabeth's life, was also with her, like trying to help all of them get to camp. It's interesting. I think like Annabeth has more inherent confidence. That means that when she speaks, people listen to her, whereas Grover, as of right now, doesn't have that inherent confidence. So when in this chapter he smells, I'm smelling like a monster scent, like I don't think this is a safe place to be, he doesn't say it with the confidence that Annabeth would, and so I think he's not listened to, even though he has a lot of overlapping experience with her in like surviving the world, and surviving in the world with a child of the big three, right. But I think to me, it felt like it showed that difference of like when you believe in yourself and you have confidence in what you're saying, other people are more likely to be like, oh yeah, you know what you're talking about.
Even if you don't sometimes.
Yep. Fully.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I do, I don't know that we really go into it, but I do wonder if even subconsciously, if Annabeth has any feelings or opinions of Grover based on how the quest went, because like he really beats himself up over it, and like I know he gets reassurance from other people, but like she was really little at the time, and even just the way that like she clearly has sort of younger parts in her that still view Luke in that like super adoring way, and like have this respect for Talia. Know, it's possible that she subconsciously does have some feelings like, at the end of the day, like, I don't know if Grover has the right idea, or I don't know if he can, like, lead something, Right. And she's been, like, training all this time to get to do something like this. So, you know, and also she, her fatal flaw is about thinking that she can, like, be right and do anything and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So, that could come into play, but she's the one who most strongly doubts Grover, actually, in this chapter at first. Yeah. And that kind of surprised me when I reread that, So,
but I think to your point, like, I think it would make complete sense because, she was 7 when she went to camp, and I can't remember how many months or like for what period of time.
Yeah, they were all together.
They were all together. I can't remember if it was a period of weeks or months, but I think it would make complete sense to me that Annabeth at this point does not have full trust in Grover, because her last experience with him would have been him basically, in her eyes, like unsuccessfully, like ended pretty badly to camp. Yeah, because it ended pretty badly through like no fault of his own,
for sure.
Like they were overwhelmed, and and he is a child, like he's not an adult, with like extraordinary powers who should have been capable of handling the situation. Like he was a child trying to help other children.
Well, and that's why I bring up like the parts work idea of it all. Which is like, Annabeth, it would make perfect sense if parts of her might see Grover in that way of like, you didn't complete the thing, and other parts of her also have compassion for him and also think he did, like, remember all the great jobs he did. I'm sure he saved their lives many times. Like, that like she would have these mixed feelings, but that combined with his lack of confidence might affect how she's able to follow him when he has an opinion or idea or, what have you. Yeah. And so I think, when they're talking about, like, I think it's great that Annabeth is able to, like, recognize Percy's bravery in this moment. And, it's gracious on her end. I think even though she's kind of like, they're all in this tense place, I don't think that she's like excited to give Percy a compliment at this point in their relationship. So I think that was nice of her to like recognize it, especially since she just, kind of snapped about it. And I think, and then she honestly responds to him, it's just that if you died, aside from the fact that it would really suck for you, it would mean the quest was over, and this may be my only chance to see the real world, which I feel like is like, it's sad. And I think, thinking about how long she's trained and how long she's been at camp. And she goes on to talk about how she only has left for short field trips because it didn't work out to live with her dad. And yeah, I think it's also admirable that she's like being honest about her stakes in this right now. And she's not trying to like pretend it's any other way. She's just like, look, this is my chance to be out here fighting monsters and like doing the things I've been training for. Like, you're my chance for that. And obviously, I don't want you to die, but also for me, you know? Like, it's both and kind of situation.
Well, and that just made me kind of realize for a moment that I think it's really interesting that our three main characters, all of their primary reasons for being on this quest are like personal, individual to themselves reasons. Like none of the characters' primary reason is because they're like, I must find Zeus's lightning bolt and restore peace within the gods. It's like, Percy's like, I want to bring my mother back. Grover's like, I want to get my searcher's license. And Annabeth is like, I just literally want to leave camp.
I just want to fight some monsters.
I want to do these things that I have been training to do for 5 years and actually leave camp for more than just like a supervised field trip. And all of them have, and it's like high stakes for everybody. You know, like it's very high emotional important stakes for all three of them. And I think it's very interesting to have three characters on a quest together who all have priorities that are not what the quest is.
Not that quest. Well, and the last time we talked about this with Percy's motivation, we talked about how from a writing perspective and a reading perspective, it's very emotionally impactful and engaging to have somebody have a personal motivation for what they're doing. And so I think, having each of them have their own and then having them be working toward this quest regardless, right? Like on top of that, I do think it adds a lot more like nuance to the dynamic and to the journey, like to the adventure, because we kind of know as the reader, and they all know for each other, right? So like they, even in their actions, you could wonder like, are they doing this even for the other person for the quest or because they know Percy knows Annabeth wants to fight a monster, or you know, Percy knows Grover needs a searcher's license. Like it kind of also adds motivation like on behalf of each other on top of their own motivation. And then there's the quest, which is kind of fun, even though it's like supposedly a life ending threat that they're facing. Right.
It's like the end of the world, and I think that also feels incredibly like in a very true and like grounded portrayal of, okay, if you get 3 12-year-olds together and you tell them so the end of the world could happen unless you don't do this, but also each of them has their own personal things. Like, Annabeth's main priority is going to be, I've been dying to leave camp since I was 7. That is going to matter emotionally more to me than some kind of theoretical, nebulous, larger concept of, I guess the world could end, but you know,
whatever that means,
whatever that means, and whatever that looks like, I don't really know. You know, but all of them, I think it feels very realistic.
Yeah, and like developmentally, it would be appropriate for like your world is more you-centric at that age, right? And so like it actually is developmentally appropriate, and it makes sense for them to have sort of like a personal stake that feels more important, and to not have a full concept of what the world ending would mean, the way that like an older adult would be like, oh, that would be my main focus, you know, or what have you, right? Because like again, that would be more developmentally, you know, in line. And also to not be like heroes at a place where you're like, I do this for the greater good of the world, because that again, that feels like an adult statement to say, you know. But these kids are heroes, and a lot of what drives them, because they are, you know, we're going to follow them from like 12 to 16. A lot of what drives them is their own internal, like, this is what matters to me. This is what I care about. Which is like what you relate to as a reader.
exactly. It's like, I relate to, you're going on, like, in the next book, it's like, I relate to Percy being like, I have to go save my best friend. And so I'm going to break camp rules and do all these things because that's my best friend. And also we have this link, and I might die if he dies. So it's very important that I go save him, you know? But, like, it's very relatable to, like you were saying, it's just very relatable to read motivations like that.
Yeah, for sure. And it can almost be boring if a kid just like automatically is like, I am altruistic. You know, I feel like that's
right. Yeah.
That's why like Jason can sometimes come across, I think, a little bit more like vanilla or boring or something. I've heard the opinions here on this. I don't personally have beef with Jason, but I think that there's an element of the like, I do it because I'm altruistic, that is like, okay, tell me more. Like, who are you? What do you care about? Like, what are you interested in? And of course he doesn't remember any of those things, but I'm just saying, like, I think that the piece about like, I have a dark past or secret, or I'm going to go do like save my mom, or like these things add layering that can kind of like, I think, bring you in a different way, and that you can relate to, because a lot of kids aren't like out there trying to, altruistically just do a thing and not have their own concerns at all. A lot of adults do.
Yes, you brought up Jason, and you haven't read Trials of Apollo yet, and I can't wait for you to read Trials of Apollo.
I've only read the first one.
The day that we get to that. No, I know, so there's so much that you don't know. And so I'm just having to bite my tongue and be like, we will get to those books, and we'll get to talk about everything. I'm curious to see, I am curious for, once you have read everything, I'm curious for like your thoughts on Jason as a character. And it's fine if they don't change, but I will be very curious to see your thoughts on Jason as a character after you've read that series.
Me too. I think it will be fun. I think hopefully it'll be fun for the listeners too, but it's fun to start with books that we've both read, and then I think it'll be a really interesting podcast when we get to ones that you've read and I haven't.
Oh, it will be so
I think that's going to be... So I'm really like... I kind of want to keep it that way, just because I feel like it will be a really fun
me too.
way to do it. So
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Really work on no spoilers and, not giving anything away. But back to the current chapter in the book that we are reading. We were talking, we were at the part where Annabeth says that it hadn't worked out for her to live at home with her dad. And I particularly loved the description of, like, after her dialogue, it says she was rushing her words out now as if she were afraid somebody might try to stop her. And I feel like that feels like such an apt description for both, like, how Annabeth would be feeling internally and how Percy would be experiencing, like, her saying this to him. Because it's, like, I think about the times, like, being vulnerable is something that's very hard for me. So when I do it, it does sometimes feel like that, like, I have to rush through this because I don't, like, it feels like if I don't rush through and get this all out now, it's never coming out, you know? But I think, like, both the person sharing feels that, but then also the person receiving the information feels that, like, you can feel that energy. This is coming at me like 90 miles an hour.
Yes. Well, and, like, again, we know that Annabeth and Percy's relationship is tenuous. Like, it's not well established at this point. And I think even, like, their conversation later with the zoo animals and stuff is going to be in a different energy, right? Because they've, at that point, been through more and they have a different relationship. So it makes sense totally to me that, like, this vulnerability feels, like, scary and, like, you would rush through it in this moment. And even that she's sharing it at all, right, is cool. And we'll learn later, like, how also particularly, like, hard her relationship is with her dad. And how it's, like, it's full of a lot of strife and, like, really kind of, like, exposed nerves of, like, it's a really easy thing. Like, it gets her, like, upset very quickly and very easily. It's a very hard thing for her. Yeah, exactly. Very understandably. And so her just even
sharing the statement of it didn't work out for me living at home, which is a short, very simple sentence.
Yeah.
Like that
it
being
holds
so hard
much
for her to share makes sense as we learn more and more about her and what her relationship with her dad was like and her experience and all of that.
Absolutely. And then she goes on to say that, like, she's been training and that's all good and everything, but the real world is where the monsters are, and that's where you learn whether you're any good or not. And for all her confidence there, Percy hears, he says, if I didn't know any better, I could have sworn I heard doubt in her voice. And I'm sure it's there. Like, I think anyone who trains or prepares something, even like studying for a test or something, like, you might feel confident in your process and you might feel prepared, but that doesn't mean there's no doubt. Like, that doesn't mean that you aren't scared at all for you know, what will happen when you're actually in the moment of what you came to do.
Well, and especially just going back again to like the last time Annabeth was in the world in a situation where she was fighting monsters, she was 7. You know, younger than 7. And so would have been a child and would have very much been, I mean, an even younger child than she is now because she's currently a child. But would have like been relying a lot more on Luke and Talia to keep her safe, though she did survive like on her own very impressively for a long time. Like, and so I could imagine that there's also this built up kind of anxiety and doubt and all these things mixed together, because the last time she was out in the world she was 7 and now she's 12, and there's probably a feeling of like, I should be even better at this, but I haven't had the chance to like test and prove that. And it also like, it made me wonder, that statement of that's where you learn whether you're any good or not, it felt to me like she feel like my interpretation of this was that like she feels she needs to prove it to herself, but also part of me felt like she is like trying to prove it to like Luke and Talia and maybe also even Chiron as well, that I feel like she and like her mom I think too, like I think she has a lot of people that she feels like she needs to prove herself to, and so they're just like layers and layers and layers and layers of emotional stakes on this quest for her.
And like we talked about with Grover, like the last time also didn't end very well, so like everyone involved in that situation has some scars from it, like emotional, literal, whichever way, like everybody involved in it you know, has that. And I think that probably weighs on her mind, and as a 7-year-old she probably felt the most helpless in that situation, and that was probably a really hard day for her. So I think one thing then next is I was reflecting on how Percy is very good at reassuring people. That's like one of his skills or strengths. And I'm sure he gets that from his mom. But we've already talked about like how he reassures Grover, and he's like really, really good at it and very sweet. And I love that his, you know, reaction to her doubt is to come in with like, not just reassurance broadly, like, oh no, I think you'll be great or something, but to pick something specific, a couple specific things that she just did that like show off something that she is confident in, that like boosts her confidence. I think this is also really good like leadership on his part, but he says, you're pretty good with that knife. And she says, you think so? And I think even that response from her is like, she stays in her vulnerability, and she's like, asking for a second reassurance. And he says, anybody who can piggyback ride a Fury is okay by me. And there he uses his like humor and his ability to reassure people together. And I think it's so effective. And, you know, he can't see, but he thinks that Annabeth smiles. And it's just like such a sweet moment between them. And this is what I was talking about. Like we get tension, then we get sweetness and tension, you know, kind of like going back and forth. We're working out, we're massaging it out, you know, like the relationship is not there yet, but this is a really, really sweet moment between the two of them.
And I feel like, to your point of in her saying you think she stays in her vulnerability, like I think she does still a little bit when she follows up by saying, you know, maybe I should tell you something funny back on the bus, and she doesn't get to finish that sentence, but like I think that is a moment of vulnerability, because I think her intellect is something that she's very proud of, and like I think gives her a lot of confidence, and that's a moment of her, like, I think she was going to point out probably that the Furies said like it, where is it, and not him, where is he. But she doesn't have the answer to why they were saying that. And she doesn't have the understanding of what does that mean. And like, okay, that means Chiron was wrong, and what he kind of broke down is like what this quest would be like and what we're trying to accomplish here. That I think it feels vulnerable. Like, I think if she were able to finish the sentence, I think it would be vulnerable for her to be like, I noticed something, but I don't have the full picture yet. Sure. I just have a piece that just makes me have questions and not like answers. And I think for Annabeth, like, to me at least, that feels like it's vulnerable for her to have questions and not have answers.
Totally. I think that's a great point. I agree.
But they're interrupted by Grover testing out his reed pipes and realizing that they still work.
The one thing they still have.
Yep, they've still got those reed pipes. And Grover goes, if I could just remember a Find Path song, we could get out of these woods. And he pops out a few notes, but they sound suspiciously like Hilary Duff. So he's still working on that Find Path song. And Percy, instead of finding a path, slams into a tree and gets a nice sized knot on his head. Because it's dark and they're walking through the woods. There are no lights. They don't have flashlights. They don't have cell phones with flashlights. They don't have nothing on them.
They don't have nothing. And he says, add that to the list of superpowers I did not have. Infrared vision. And I will say, like, I do love this because I feel like sometimes the practical, like, implications or ramifications of, like, different situations in books or movies, you're like, how did you do that without this happening? Or how did this happen? And I feel like here it's like, someone's going to hit their head on a tree branch. Like, that
absolutely
would be a ramification of going through a woods in the dark. Like, so I do like it when authors put in, like, take the time to put in some realistic like consequences of the situation they put their characters in, and don't like skip over those little pieces, because it's not like absolutely. It plays a big role in the plot if I remember correctly. Like, no, but it's a thing that happens and it makes sense and it it's not fun.
Oh,
but
yeah.
It's gotta happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it also, the wording of adding that to the list of superpowers, I immediately was imagining like Percy having this mental list of like, okay, I can control plumbing and I can like
toilet water check,
all the things that he can do. But then I thought about it for a second and I was like, if I had powers of any kind, I would absolutely be making a list. I would be testing things out to be like, do I also have this? Do I, like I would fully be like, okay, all the powers I know can possibly happen based on movies and comics, etc. Which ones do I have and which ones do I not
Which
have?
ones make sense? Which ones make sense with my godly parent? Do I have that? I feel like I feel like too, I was thinking like, dang, I feel like his list is gonna get longer, but right now, like, he's still kind of in the dark about what he can do. Like,
he's just kind of like plumbing.
Plumbing. Really maybe he remembers the water fountain thing, like. But we're not breathing underwater yet. Like, we're not doing any kind of like the kind of super impressive stuff that he'll learn. So
making hurricanes.
I mean, no kidding. So we'll get there. But that list will slowly grow over time. But it is kind of a funny thing to imagine, like a check, like yes, no, yes, no. Like that would be a funny checklist.
Yeah, it would be. Adding to the realism, they're tripping and cursing and generally feeling miserable for another mile, until Percy starts to see a light up ahead, the colors of a neon sign, and he smells food, fried, greasy, excellent food. And this is where he says, I realized I hadn't eaten anything unhealthy since I had arrived at Half-Blood Hill. And we are, I believe the wording you said on was, we are a food positive podcast.
We are a food positive podcast, for the record, and we don't believe in making moral judgments on food or putting them into categories like healthy, unhealthy, etc., which you probably would know from our other conversations about being a fat positive
Unless
podcast.
This is like your first podcast.
Yeah, unless this is your first podcast with us, in which case, highly recommend looking up intuitive eating, health at every size, various resources. But just for the record, yeah, food positive podcast, and love a cheeseburger. So, you know, Percy is smelling this food, and the feeling after you have not eaten in a while. Yeah. You're on a quest. Oh, yeah. You just had like a traumatic thing happen, which I'm sure spiked all the things, all your nervous system. Yeah. You're going through a dark woods. You hit your head. You are tired. You are hungry. You know, you've been used to being fed like a nice dinner every night around a fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that food is smelling good. That food is smelling good.
It is.
And yeah. So they're walking down a deserted 2-lane road through the trees, and there's a closed down gas station, a tattered billboard for a 1990s movie, which, reading this now, is kind of extra funny if you were reading it like today for the first time and not thinking about the context of when this was written. And one open business, which was the source of the neon light and the good smell. And generally speaking, if you're a demigod, the PSA for this is, if you are in some kind of abandoned type place and there is only one business open, it is run by monsters. Like, that is the only option. That will always be the only option. Run away quickly.
If you are somewhere and you are surprised to find the existence of a food establishment, or an establishment of any kind for that matter, you're just like,
car
how
mechanics.
could this be here? Whoa. Just say, you know what, let's avoid it. Let's not go there.
Let's go in a different direction, especially if there's nothing specific we're having to get from said location. Like, we do get something out of the location, which at least there's that. But if you're not there as part of the quest, you know, I know your tummy's grumbling, I get that, but I don't think the cheeseburger was worth it. So move on. Let's move on.
No. Yeah. Percy notes that it wasn't a fast food restaurant, but a kind of like odd, it's a curio shop, which I realized I don't think I've heard that used outside of this book. Is it like,
I know of a curio cabinet, but I'm not sure. I think I'm not sure the connotation of curio shop, but you know, kind of like they've got outdoor lawn flamingos and statues and carvings, and you know, that kind of like roadside spot is I suppose what that is referring to, because that's how it's described, and it's kind of like a warehouse kind of setup.
Yeah. Percy says the neon sign above the gate was impossible for me to read, because if there's anything worse for my dyslexia than regular English, it's red cursive neon English. And I love that we get what it looks like to him. Like, I love that so much, because it's like, I don't have dyslexia. So, like, I can imagine, like, okay, trying to read a sign and the words, like, I can be like, okay, I think I'd try to imagine what that would look like for the words to not look like what the sign says. But I love getting what it looks like to Percy, because then I can picture that even more clearly in my mind, and, like, totally, you know, kind of like understand that a little bit better than I otherwise
especially
would,
imagining this in red cursive neon.
Totally.
Like, it's funny to imagine this. That line has always stuck in my head, actually, about the red cursive neon being, if anything, was harder than English. Yeah, like, there's something about that visual that has just always stuck in my head. Yeah.
And Percy asks Annabeth, what the heck does it say? And Annabeth goes, I don't know. And Percy kind of goes, oh, right, she loves reading so much, I'd forgotten that she was also dyslexic. And so they're just like, we got no clue what that sign says, man.
I know. Like, I think it's sweet. Like, I kind of love this moment where they're like united, because most of the time, like, she would know a lot more than Percy. So it's kind of like a nice moment where they're both having the same challenge, which it's just kind of like fun when that happens to me, because you know, I don't know, it just like puts them on the same page for a second. But also, given like what he says here, I think is super important and meaningful. It's like Annabeth loves knowledge so much that she perseveres beyond the challenges of dyslexia and ADHD to like read these tomes, like these giant, you know, architecture books and all these things. Like, the girl loves knowledge, man.
She does. Yeah. And so Grover very helpfully translates the sign for them, and he goes, Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium. And they see 2 cement garden gnomes flanking the entrance, and this is where we kind of start to get hints at the particular monster that it is that we like the characters will be facing in this chapter, because it says that they are smiling and waving as if they're about to get their picture taken. So it's like the first, I think, kind of little moment of like, hey, this is who's coming around the corner in this chapter.
Which I have a question. So this tells us that garden gnomes are like real creatures. That's what this tells us.
Oh yeah.
So my question is,
that's true.
We don't meet a garden gnome in any of the series, right? That I know of?
I don't think so. Unless I'm forgetting a time that we meet a garden gnome.
It's like so funny to me that like this basically confirms the existence of garden gnomes in this universe. True. And I want to meet one, and I like want to know what their lives are like, and what's the deal? Because like, it's a thing that humans have so many of and collect, is these like statues. Right. Are all the garden gnome statues in the world like from Medusa, or like do humans create garden gnome statues based on the actual mythical being of the garden gnome, or are they all real garden gnomes that are pretending to be statues? I have so many questions.
Well, but also, I've never thought about this sentence so much.
This is what I'm here for.
Book, but I have never associated gnomes with Greek mythology. I don't know Greek mythology extensively to know, like, is there a gnome or a gnome equivalent in Greek mythology? So we're going to need to look this up.
I'll do some gnome research.
Because, I have never once... I've always paid attention to the smiling and waving. My brain has never kind of fully processed that, like, it does say that they are garden gnomes. And so that means that they were, at one point, alive garden gnomes who then got turned into statues.
Yes. This is my question. So anyway, I'm just like, this opened up a whole world of possibilities to me that I'm really curious about.
Yeah. Wow.
So we'll have to do some follow-up on the gnome question.
Yes, we will. And so Percy is like immediately starting to cross the street. And this is where we're going to get the first of like a couple of times in this chapter where Grover is kind of trying to warn the group that like he doesn't feel great about the place that they're about to enter. And he's not really confident in sharing it. The others don't really listen to him because he goes, hey, ... and it says Grover warned. So yeah, this is like the first of a couple times in the chapter where Grover is going to start trying and warning them, and it happens again. Annabeth's like, oh, the lights are on, maybe it's open, and both Percy and Annabeth are like, oh, snack bar, like, let's go. And Grover goes, are you too crazy? This place is weird. And it literally says, we ignored him.
Literally.
And yeah, they just their brains like don't even register like his concern at all. And that's going to happen like a few more times throughout this chapter.
I do wonder, so you know how in the Lotus Casino there's sort of like the Lotus smell that seems to be affecting their senses and stuff like that? It did make me wonder, because there's even Percy later, when Annabeth kind of snaps out of it, like, it did make me wonder if there is anything magical about the food smell, because it seems to be also kind of affecting their senses, and like that they're being drawn to it in a way that's, I don't know, more than just being hungry.
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to remember when they like find the like donut shop, you know?
Yeah,
like
the monster donuts.
In the middle of the forest. Like, yeah. I feel like they kind of have a similar thing where it feels like it should be really obvious that that's a place run by monsters, but they're like, donuts sound good. So I feel like there is something about like monsters who are like running these food establishments. Right. That there is some magic imbued or something. Like,
like maybe the mist,
the aroma, or
like something about the mist is happening, or something. I feel like is adding an extra layer here beyond being hungry. Unless you know, it's like we have hungry Grover, so maybe we have hungry Percy and hungry Annabeth, and like when that happens,
maybe
sense goes out the window and we don't listen to people's concerns.
Yeah. And so they pass through the front lot that they say was a forest of statues, and Grover, one of them in particular, a cement satyr playing the pipes, gives him the creeps, and he goes, "Looks like my Uncle Ferdinand." And that's again a moment where he kind of calls it out, but he in that moment doesn't even stop himself to go, hold on a second, why do I think that looked like my Uncle Ferdinand? That's really specific. Like, let me take this in for another moment, because my Uncle Ferdinand is missing, and there's a statue that looks just like him, and that's weird.
A little suspicious.
Like, he doesn't. And even when they stop at the warehouse store, and Grover pleads, "Don't knock, I smell monsters." He doesn't do anything, I don't know, brash, like try to like literally pull them away, or like anything big. Like, it feels like he's doing the best that he can to communicate his concerns, but he's still going back to that kind of central thing with Grover of like, he still doesn't have the confidence yet to be like, I need you to stop, listen to me, and realize that we need to get out of here right now.
Like take on that leadership role within the trio and say something a little more forceful, or a little stronger. Like or just be like, I'm not going in there. Like, y'all should stay with me. There's so many ways to do it, and that's again, that's like, it's a very relatable experience, I think, for a lot of people to be like, I wasn't trusting my instincts, or like I knew that, and then we did it anyway, or whatever, even in the smallest of things, right? It's like, that takes, sometimes you have to build that in yourself, right? Like, especially if you weren't taught it, or like if you've had your confidence undermined, and Grover has, like, you have to have many, many reparative experiences of believing in yourself and trusting your instincts in order to get back to a place where like you could take charge in a situation like that. Yeah,
absolutely. And Annabeth's reply is so interesting after Grover says, "I smell monsters," because she says, "Your nose is clogged up from the Furies. All I smell is burgers. Aren't you hungry?" To which I want to be like, demigods can't smell monsters. No. Why are you saying all I smell is burgers? You don't have the ability to smell monsters, to detect them that way with that sense. Like, I was like, Annabeth, why are you acting like you... That's something you're capable of doing.
This is what
Again,
saying.
It's probably that there's like magic pulling them in, that's kind of like clouding their judgment. But I was just like, you literally can't do that. You literally do not possess the ability.
And the thing is, like, she knows that Grover can, right? And like, she knows that Grover has. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's interesting, this piece where like she doesn't have that full confidence in Grover that you might expect her to have from their history together. But I think it's probably because of that. And I think there has to be some mist or magical element here, because the way that she's so dismissive and says like, all I smell is burgers. It's like there's just something. There's something here, I think, that's sort of like extra enticing that's happening. And when she says, "Aren't you hungry?" Grover says, "Meat," scornfully. "I'm a vegetarian." and then Percy says, "You eat cheese enchiladas in aluminum cans." And I'm like, that's vegetarian. But Grover responds, "Those are vegetables." And I was like, actually, they're not vegetables. Like, that is vegetarian. Not vegetables, though, Grover. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to tell you that.
In his like food pyramid.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
That's the vegetables
exactly. Oh my god,
category.
Grover's food pyramid. That would be Percy's checklist, and Grover's food pyramid would be two things that would be fun to make from this chapter.
Yes.
But here he tries. He says, "Come on, let's leave. These statues are ... looking at me." And I think it's just that at the end he kind of loses. I think the command "let's leave" is forceful. That's a strong start. But I don't think it can fully put into words. And again, that's like sometimes trusting your instincts, even though you don't have the full why or the full words for like what you know. I think that is really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And I think he, like, because he doesn't have that self-trust, he kind of undermines himself and in a way, and then I think makes it easier for Percy and Annabeth to dismiss him while they're in these states where they're not fully themselves.
Totally.
And yeah, it's like this I was getting like sad for him, you know, because like he is picking up on it and he is trying to tell them like the best that he can, but they're just literally like not able to like process what he's telling them, and so it makes me kind of sad for him in this moment where he's really trying to protect his friends. He's really trying to be a protector and be like, no, we should not go in here. But he's getting outvoted. He can't
by the hungry team.
There's something else.
The hungry members of the team are for once he's not the hungry one.
Yeah.
Yes. So the door is creaking open, and then they see Auntie M. And this is where we wanted to address the description of Medusa in this book. I think it's really important to do so because it is a depiction of a Middle Eastern woman, and neither of us being Middle Eastern, we didn't want to like speak for a community that we're not a part of that's also like so diverse in and of itself. And so we actually did look to a Tumblr post by Moon the Apollo Camper, and just as a experience and a analysis from somebody who is Middle Eastern and lives in the Middle East, from this character and is a Percy Jackson fan, because there's and we'll link it in the show notes and we'll link it on YouTube. Just kind of talking about like the portrayal of Medusa, also kind of placing it in the context, right, of the early 2000s, like a post 9/11 context where there was obviously a lot of like racism and stereotyping of Middle Eastern people based on the response to 9/11. And so I just want to kind of go to like the summary at the end to kind of share some of the themes here. And we just want to like have this in mind as we talk about the rest of the story, that we're holding this context and this analysis in mind as she continues to be described through the chapter. So a few of the things that kind of come out of this Tumblr post that we encourage you to read yourself. One is that Middle Easterners don't have a fixed look. So they don't all have the same like color skin or color hair. Also not all the same like dress, and that there's also an emphasis here of like using specific language like hijab or like other language that's like appropriate to identify clothing, rather than just like keeping it broad and like not specific and not stereotyping that. And also to not make a Middle Eastern person a villain or a monster if there aren't any other Middle Eastern characters on the good side, which is the case in this book. And if you're the only character from a region that already gets stereotyped as evil and an evil character, that's really problematic and racist. And so, yeah, we just wanted to like highlight this because you can't escape it in this book. Like it's like the whole chapter here, and we were talking about how like normally we don't read this chapter so slowly, and obviously when you're a kid you might not pick up on everything in your favorite books, but as adults, you know, as you get older you do. And I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a problematic part of the book. So is there anything that you wanted to add?
I think one of the other things that Tumblr post I remember specifically said was like, don't describe like people of color skin tone as food. You know, like, let's also not.
That's a good general,
that.
writing rule. Yes.
Just a general blanket across the board, because that is done here. And what I was kind of like reflecting on as well, in addition to what this really great Tumblr post like outlined and said, was that like I was looking up in the like old original myths of Medusa, like where she was said to be from, and I do not know how to correctly pronounce the name, so I'm not going to try, but it's a place in modern day like northwestern Turkey, like on the coast of northwestern Turkey, and it was just, for me, like it felt like an important reminder of like Greece was an incredibly vastly large empire,
ancient Greece,
that was not just ancient Greece, and that empire was not just white people. And so like engaging in these books based on Greek mythology, like unfortunately, especially in this first series, like we just have pretty much only a lot of white people, and then, you know, the handful of times we do, like in this description, like we get someone who is described as not being white. She's described as being just very vaguely generally Middle Eastern, and she's this like horrible, monstrous villain.
Right.
And so just kind of like sitting with the fact that a lot of the like people from the myths that like you grew up with, and if you like reading Greek mythology and any sort of interpretation of it, whether it's these books or like other interpretations or other retellings or what have you, that like a lot of these characters are people who like would not have been white by like our today's like racial understanding of the world and how we've constructed race societally today.
Right. And there's like so many ways in which Greek mythology has been whitewashed. Like we were talking about how, you know, statues that like now, because they're 2,000 years old, are like white marble, but like we know from a lot of different things like that like a lot of these things were painted, and a lot of these things would have portrayed people with like the skin tones that they actually had and stuff like that. And so there's this, you know, as like Greek and Roman, you know, mythology and mathematics and all the things were like taken up by Europeans, that there was like a whitewashing that kind of continues to today that does give us this like false sense of who these characters were, and like mapping whiteness onto them when oftentimes that wouldn't have been the case. And you know, we have talked about how we appreciate that like Rick Riordan as an author over time seems to have like learned and grown and been able to like, and also partnered with people with lived experience to like write different characters and books and things like that. So we will definitely get into those things later, which I am looking forward to. And so it's kind of like, you know, I think it's important to talk about the books that we love in their whole nuanced complexity, like the whole context, and the authors too, because I don't think it's ever good to put anybody on a pedestal or like never critique people, and we don't need to like tear people down for making mistakes. I think everybody makes mistakes and everybody can learn from them, but that it's important to like confront these things when they happen. It's
I think it's really important to be able to engage critically with the things that we love, and like to be able to hold the nuance. Like I said, I think in the very first podcast episode, like this was my favorite book series growing up. It remains to this day like one of my all-time favorite book series, and it comes with its complications. It comes with its many things that I don't like, that I don't appreciate, that I wish were different about it. And I think it's important to be able to just sit in the nuance and the bit of discomfort that comes with that nuance of being able to say, I love this thing, and I also don't like parts of this thing. And I disagree with parts of this thing, and I wish that parts of this thing were different. Like, those two things can be true at the same time. And I also think it's okay, like, not only to, like, allow authors to grow and change and learn. I think it's also okay and important as readers to do the same thing. Like, when I first read these books at 8 years old, my brain did not process every single thing in the way that it does now, or in the ways that it did in the years that followed the first time I read these books. As I learned, I started to like pick up more on like, oh, this makes me uncomfortable, and oh, I now understand why this makes me uncomfortable, and oh, I now understand even more the layers to which this makes me uncomfortable, and I don't like this element of the book. And so, yeah, I think it's just like, I think all of us learning and growing and changing is important. And yeah, and nuance is great. Nuance is what we should hopefully all be doing.
Yeah, we are pro food, pro nuance podcast. Hot take. Yeah, so we just wanted to make sure that we had that discussion and that we linked that for you all, and obviously encourage you to read other like posts and conversations from, you know, Middle Eastern writers, just because, like, you know, no one person can represent an entire community, but we felt like this was a helpful take. So thank you to Moon the Apollo Camper for that helpful resource, and we're going to hold that in mind as we go through. Like, we're hearing, you know, her voice and what she's telling the kids, and seeing her as a villain in this particular story. So
yeah. Oh, and I think just because it is emphasized a lot, that post also pointed out like the inherent racism in the like trance. I have put you in a trance, and I like
yes
like drawing
that's
you
like a
in
stereotype.
That, like,
yes,
there's inherent and there's inherent racism in that portrayal, and that happens a lot. That's going to be in the descriptions of like all of her dialogue. And is like in all of her like interactions, particularly with Percy. So yeah, there are many layers to all of this. The post is really great. If you all know of other resources, posts, articles, etc. that you would like to share, like, please share them in the comments so that we can all read them and we can all have access to them. And
also your own perspective. Like, if this was part of your experience and reading the books, like, we'd love to hear what you thought too. Have a good conversation about it. And so she says, "Children, it is too late to be out all alone. Where are your parents?" And at this point, I'm wondering if, like, she knows that they're demigods and is, like, asking, like, a false question, or if she's trying to assess if they're demigods.
I mean, she very quickly, like, on the next page calls Annabeth by her name. And so I feel like she's just kind of playing along. Like, I think she knows, but I think she's just kind of, like, being, like, playing along in this game of, like, I'm an adult, you know. Right. This is what an adult would ask. The normal question to ask is, you are children, where are your parents? Right.
Yeah, no, I do think it's part of like, the... trying to get them in through the door and, like, have a conversation with them and stay talking to her and stuff like that. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And then Annabeth does not have an immediate reply. She has not come in with a strategy brain on this one. And so Percy goes, "We're orphans." No parents to speak of.
And he even comes in with a really detailed backstory as well, because he goes, "We got separated from our caravan, our circus caravan. The ringmaster told us to meet him at the gas station if we got lost, but he may have forgotten, or maybe he meant a different gas station. Anyway, we're lost. Is that food I smell?" And I'm just like, Percy, you need to do improv. Like, you so quickly got into specifics and details and made this whole world and, like, characters for y'all. I'm like, go do improv, Percy. You would be great. And also, you do have an imagination, to our point from, like, episodes back about, like, Percy saying he doesn't have an imagination. He does.
He keeps proving himself wrong left and right. It's funny because I think it's in Psych, the TV show, that they talk about how like a lie always has a seed of truth in it. And I feel like, and that's how like you can come up with a lie in the first place. And I actually feel like the seed of truth in this one is that there's a gas station outside. Like, I feel like that's kind of what he grasped onto, was like, why would we be here? It's because we're supposed to meet the ringmaster of the circus at the gas station, which I did see that there was a gas station. And I mean, they are lost, so that part's true too. But I just thought it was interesting. Like, there's this idea that there's always like a detail that is factual in some way, and then you build a story kind of around it.
Right. And so she welcomes them in, tells them to go like straight to the back, so there's a dining area back there, and Annabeth like mutters to Percy, circus caravan, and he's just like, you always gotta have a strategy, right? And this is where we get her kind of like, I think, teasing and like a more on the like fun playful side, where she just says, your head is full of kelp. A classic,
but she
like,
didn't have anything better to say.
Burn. No, she didn't. No, she didn't have anything prepped for that moment. She just had their So they walk through the warehouse, and it's filled with more statues. And Percy notes that they're all life size, which is another, I think, hint of like, these are not just any old statues, the fact that all of them are life-sized. And then we get this funny, like, fourth wall break where he goes, go ahead, call me an idiot for walking into a strange lady's shop like that just because I was hungry, but I do impulsive stuff sometimes.
ADHD.
Yes. Yep. ADHD. And I do think this next part about like the smell and the aroma was like laughing gas in the dentist chair made everything else go away. Like, I do think indicates, like we were saying earlier, there's something magical. There's something happening. Yeah. Like, the aroma is doing something literally like to them. So Percy like doesn't notice Grover's nervous whimpers, or the fact that the statue's eyes seem to follow him, or the fact that Auntie Em had locked the door behind them, which is terrifying.
Yeah, I'm like, that very, part very feels like a really big detail to overlook. Like, I'm like, okay, maybe you could like think you're imagining the statues. You know Grover's kind of an anxious boy. Like, maybe you think he's being anxious Grover instead of hungry Grover right now. Like, maybe. But the locking of the door, I feel like that's a big red flag that we missed here, guys.
Yeah. But Percy is just kind of one-track mind about getting to the dining area. And when they sit down and Grover like sits reluctantly, he says, we don't have any money, ma'am, because he's kind of the only one who's still really like has his wits about him. I would say. In this moment, and Auntie Em is like, no, like, no children, no money, like, basically like, don't worry about it, like, it's her treat for such nice orphans. And when Annabeth thanks her, Percy notes that Auntie Em stiffened as if Annabeth had done something wrong. Then the old woman relaxed just as quickly, so I figured it must have been my imagination. So this is a moment where Percy is like clocking something that's happening that's like off, but he's not listening to his own self in this moment.
Yep, and she says, quite all right, Annabeth. You have such beautiful gray eyes, child. And here we get red flag number 2. So in general, again, so here's our second PSA, and this goes beyond demigods. This is just general, like, protocol for hero, person, and adventure thing. If somebody knows your name, and you don't know how they know your name, and you didn't tell them your name, and they shouldn't know your name, again, you run. You run fast in the other direction. Like, this is, so this feels like red flag number 2, and it seems like something Annabeth should have clocked more herself, I would think.
Absolutely. Yeah, because she's hearing her own name said back to her by a lady she has never met before.
Again, there has to be some kind of magical sense affecting something, because I feel like that's just a really big thing to miss here. And And then, of course, back to like the mythology piece of it, of course, pointing out the gray eyes, that would be like her mom's. It like makes sense that Medusa would be focused on those. But look, they are hungry because they get the double cheeseburgers, vanilla shakes, and extra, extra large servings of French fries, which sound delicious. And Percy is halfway through his burger before he remembers to breathe. And if, you know, we've all probably been that hungry that we were like halfway through our food before we remembered to like where we even were, you know? So I do think that's that's not the state in which you are making the most logical decisions. Like our brains like need food to function. So there is an element here too of like, they're starving and that might be impairing the judgment a little bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. But Grover, kind of unlike Percy and Annabeth, because he remains like the least affected by all of this, which also makes me think that it must be like there must be something specific to demigods, or something specific about being a demigod that makes them vulnerable to this in a way that Grover as a satyr isn't, because he's like picking at the fries and he's eyeing the tray's wax liner, but he's not eating any of it. He's still nervous, on edge. He's not in the state that like Percy and Annabeth are, where they're not really like thinking kind of logically at all. And he even notices this hissing noise and asks about it. But Percy and Annabeth both like don't hear anything, and NTM just says, "Oh, it's the deep fryer oil. You must have keen ears."
Grover, whose name she knows as well.
Yep.
Which we don't like point that out again.
Second name.
Second name that we know.
Yeah, that goes fully missed.
Completely missed by everyone. I was going to say that now, if she had put a tray of apples and tin cans in front of him, I don't know if he would have been so restrained. So I also don't know if the issue is that he's got like meat in front of him instead of like the food he'd prefer to eat. I don't know.
Well, but he does later end up eating the wax paper liner.
He does.
Because Percy goes, "Oh, it's weird that, you know, NTM's not saying anything about the fact that he's eating the wax liner." It's like, weird. I do, because he would be able to eat the fries and the wax paper liner. Like, he would be able to have all of those things. And I think if he weren't as scared, he probably would be eating them more quickly.
More into it. No, he definitely has his wits about him the most out of everyone. I would agree with that.
Yeah. And Grover's still trying to like cover up the fact that they're two demigods and a satyr, so he just says, "I take vitamins for my ears."
Which is so funny.
Out of the three of them, Percy's definitely, I think, the best in this moment, at coming up with something more specific on the fly.
I agree.
Still not like we're three orphans a part of a traveling circus is like not the most believable story, but he does get like far more specific than like anybody else is able to.
I mean, at least it's a story. It's not just saying and it's not I take vitamins for my ears. Like, I do think that at least we've got like some kind of cohesive narrative of like, why are we here? Where do we come from? Who are we meeting? Like, we do have some more details than that.
Yeah. And so Percy is trying to kind of make some small talk with NTM and goes, "So you sell gnomes?" And she kind of is like, "Oh yeah, and animals and people," and specifically saying like this to me felt like another like hint Easter egg moment of her saying like animals, people, like listing things out, not as like, "Oh yeah, statues of," but because she's literally selling animals and people who have been statuified. Whatever the
good point
correct word is for that. And Percy's still small talking, trying to be like, "A lot of business on this road," and she says, "Not so much, no, since the highway was built," and that she's like, "Most cars don't come this way. I must cherish every customer I get." Again, there's a lot of like, I think very specific particular wording in like the dialogue that is meant to, I think, kind of indicate that this is NTM is Medusa. And this is when Percy he notices like a statue of a young girl holding an Easter basket. looking at him, and he notices that something is wrong with her face, because her face looks startled or even terrified, because like everything is so detail precise and accurate, but then her face has this like look of fear. And NTM notices that and kind of gives this like, oh, you're picking up, face is the hardest thing to get. They just like I have so much trouble like getting the faces right. And Percy's, again, the small talk being like, oh, so you make all these yourself. And she says that, yes, once upon a time she had 2 sisters to help her in the business, but they have passed on. And now she only has her statues there, her company. And Percy specifically in this moment notes that the sadness in her voice sounded so deep and so real that he couldn't help feeling sorry for her. And the remark of the 2 sisters is what starts to kind of snap Annabeth out of it, because she starts kind of putting 2 and 2 together and making 4, because she stops eating, sits forward, and goes 2 sisters. And this is where in the book we get Rick Riordan's account of Medusa's myth and her story. And I just want to take like a quick pause here to kind of talk about her myth, her story, and like how our kind of understanding of it has changed over time, and like what the depiction of Medusa tends to be.
Yeah, lay it on us.
So doing a little bit of research, and again, I want to emphasize that this is a little bit of research, and using sources such as Wikipedia. So I'm not pretending to be some sort of like expert, like, in any of this. But Medusa has like been like, even going back to like ancient times, sometimes depicted as like always a monster, and other times depicted as like this beautiful young maiden who was then transformed into a monster by Athena. So like going back a long time, there's kind of conflicting depictions of her, though I think in more modern times it became much more of that story of she was turned into this monster by Athena. Right. Like that kind of, I think, became the like most like long-standing pervasive like depiction of her. And it wasn't really until like the 20th century that, at least again from the little bit of research that I did, and probably from what we know, because I'm sure that there were people more than like 50 years ago going, hey, I don't know about the way we're talking about this myth, y'all. They just might not have like written it down and published it somewhere. But it was in the 20th century that there really started to be this like feminist lens put on Medusa, and this kind of understanding of her as this depiction of feminine rage. And like a lot of feminist magazines used like iconography of her to kind of like, in a way, I guess, like reclaim this idea of like feminine rage and like being able to like be a woman and like have rage and experience that. And there are also kind of layers to the myth that, like, again, in the 20th century, there started to be more of an understanding of like Medusa's myth being a way to kind of like punish women for their sexuality and like for their desires, but then also another layer of like then additionally, like on top of that, viewing it from the lens of like, could she even have consented in the first place, like to like this relationship? And then also an understanding then of like in the telling where Athena's the one who punishes her and transforms her, that like Athena is punishing like the victim in the scenario and not the perpetrator in the scenario, and the perpetrator being Poseidon. And that is kind of in line with what we've talked about in so many of these episodes, where the gods do these bad things, they do these horrible things, but they're never the ones punished. It's always the mortals who are punished, and Medusa was a mortal. Interestingly enough, out of her and her two sisters, she was the only one who was mortal. The other two were not mortal.
Interesting.
And so there's just this like forever thread in mythology of like gods never being punished for their behaviors, never having to face any sort of consequences for their actions, and other people being forced to like bear the burden of consequence for things that are not their fault. So yeah, and Anna, I don't know if you have anything that like you want to add.
Yeah, I think the only other thing is like the final piece of that puzzle, because a lot of those themes run through so many stories about women and like stereotypes or descriptions and depictions of women and sexuality and things like that. I think the final piece for me is also a normalizing of violence against women, which is like obviously always like been a problem for a really long time, is currently a problem in the Perseus myth of slaying Medusa originally, and that story in and of itself is like adding another layer to all the layers you talked about of like normalizing violence against women, and also that you were saying that she is often depicted as like sleeping when he's doing it. So there's also this element of like another layer of like vulnerability and not being able to like defend herself, and just like that. That's a similar kind of piece of what you described earlier, where, you know, how much was she able to consent with Poseidon and things like that.
Yeah. And to add to what you were saying about the like normalization of violence against women, there's also, I think, inherent to this Medusa myth the like idea that there's like the quote unquote deserving and quote unquote undeserving, and like Medusa through her actions is somehow quote unquote like deserving of the violence she then experiences. Even though I'd argue that's so not the case, and there is no like quote unquote deserving and undeserving. Right. But like we see that in modern day with Me Too, and like people who come forward who like no one is a quote unquote perfect victim, but there's always like some way in which like it is like their own fault, when that's just not the reality. Like it's literally not true in any way, shape, or form. And to me, this also feels like a story where it's like, oh, well, she deserved it because blah, 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 blah.
Right, exactly.
But she didn't.
Exactly.
Like, she had violence done to her. She then was punished by Athena for something that was done to her. And then Perseus, like, sought her out and, like, enacted violence on her. Yeah. None of which was her own fault in any way, shape, or form. And then he like carts her head around. He like travels around with her head, like turns Atlas into stone, like just like turning people like into
dehumanizing
stone with like her disembodied head. Yeah.
And I think that's why her depiction, like you were talking about in the 70s, of like reclaiming her image as like rage, as like feminine rage, is so appropriate, because the story that you just described is very rage inducing, and also like has an element of punishing a woman for like legitimate rage that she expresses. And so I think like I love that reclamation, because I do think it's a story that so many women can relate to in so many different ways. And not just women, obviously, but like I think in this case, we're just speaking to Medusa and her character. But I think it tracks so well to say, like let's reclaim this story and talk about why anger and rage should be a part of women's vocabulary, particularly when facing so much violence and dismissal and, you know, oppression.
Yeah, absolutely. I read also like a reading and interpretation of like how just in so many layers, she doesn't have her own bodily autonomy, and even to the point where then Perseus is like carting her severed head around, and like, so there are just a lot of layers to Medusa's original myth. And then her depiction, like here in this book, like we talked about earlier in this episode. So she is a very like complicated mythological figure that I think comes with a lot that's important for us to, as like readers and an audience to this myth, to like think critically about, and like how is she depicted, and what does that mean about, like, what is it then telling us? Because like myths were created to like communicate like morals and ideas about the world, and they like still do that. And I think the way that we choose to tell them today continues to do that. So I think it's really important to think about, like, okay, what is the myth of Medusa in the way that we are telling it today still telling us, and about like society, and how society views women, and how society views like many different things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think like one thing I will say is that Percy does have this like compassion for Medusa in this chapter. And so when, you know, she's describing like a couple times her story, or just like her lot in life, he does like sense that sadness, and he senses that it's genuine, and he does feel bad for her. And I think that like it is like there is that piece here where he's able to like see her that way, at least for this moment. And I do think it's interesting to position Annabeth and Percy, the kids of like the gods involved in this like particular story. It would be cool if it like gave us a little like a new perspective or new angle, and like didn't kind of retell it in that way that can be problematic. But I do think it is really interesting to position them there and like have that play out now with like these two demigods.
And I think shows like, I think Annabeth's like, as soon as she kind of realizes who she is, Annabeth's immediate like resistance to her I think shows like, not to like say the same thing again, but like the power of myths and how we tell them, because Annabeth has a particular narrative in her head of what she knows or who she knows Medusa to be, and so isn't able to approach her with a sense of compassion or understanding for what she might have gone through prior to this moment. Whereas like, you know, Percy, we know like he's able to like pull the name Medusa, but like it doesn't come with, at least it seems like in this chapter, like it doesn't come with, I think, the same amount of like baggage or like preconceived notions that it does for Annabeth. Like like I think, and then we get into the fight, and it kind of just goes to like, well, they're just trying to survive. They're just trying to make it out of the situation alive. Because Percy is still keeps that ability to like feel compassionate towards Medusa.
Yeah, I think if we were going to take this story as a myth and learn something from it, I think that one of the things that we could learn from it is that bias and prejudice can cause someone to not be able to feel compassion toward another person. Because that is what we're seeing here. And I think that can so often be the case.
So, coming back to the chapter where Medusa recounts, like, her version according to, like, how she's being told in this book. Percy, like, isn't really sure what she meant. He feels bad for her. He's kind of getting really sleepy. I think this is, again, like, whatever kind of magic is happening is like really affecting him. But Annabeth is now fully snapped out of it, and she's like shaking him to get his attention and going, maybe we should go. I mean, the ringmaster will be waiting. And she's sounding tense. Grover is now eating the wax paper off of the tray. And Percy knows, but if Auntie Em found that strange, she didn't say anything.
Red flag number 3.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. She calls out Annabeth's gray eyes again and says, it has been a long time since I've seen gray eyes like those. And that's when Annabeth and Grover are both like, we need to leave right now. But Percy doesn't want to leave. He feels full and content. And he just wants to stay a while.
Yeah, and Auntie Em is, trying to keep him there, saying, I so rarely get to be with children. Before you go, won't you at least sit for a pose? And Annabeth says wearily, a pose. And Auntie Em says, a photograph. I will use it to model a new statue set. So here's the only time where, all the other times, like you pointed out, she's kind of like being honest, actually, like humans and animals and like stuff like that. But here, she's like straight up lying. Like, I will use it to model a new statue set. Children are so popular. You see, everyone loves children. And I'm just like, that feels like the most sort of like insidious part of the whole thing. Where it's like, oh, that's a little scary there. I don't like that. And Annabeth is like, I don't think we can, ma'am. Come on, Percy, and trying to get Percy to go. And Percy's just being a little too polite here, not picking up on the cues. I feel like maybe eventually over time he's going to get used to picking up on, like, Annabeth's let's go kind of face and like Grover's smelling of monsters and like take that more seriously and stuff like that. But right now, he's just like, sure we can. And he's just irritated that Annabeth is being so bossy, which, we could unpack that later, but we don't need to be calling girls bossy. But so bossy and so rude to an old lady who just fed us for free. And he says, it's just a photo, Annabeth. What's the harm? And Medusa's like, yes, Annabeth, no harm. And Annabeth doesn't like it, but she allows them to go to the front door into the Garden of Statues. And here we have, like, Grover has tried. Now Annabeth is trying. And each time, like, a different member, like, Annabeth was kind of telling Grover no. Percy's telling Annabeth no. And this is what I think is, like, an interesting chapter for their dynamic. It's, like, they're still working out the kinks. Like, they're still not, able to all know, like, when to trust each other, when to know, like, what's up, how to take subtle cues from each other. And so she's positioning them with Annabeth in the middle. And Percy's like, not much light for a photo. And I'm just like, Percy, like, put it together, listen to Annabeth, pay attention. Like, he's just a little more out of it than, he usually might be. Not tracking not as on top of it as he was earlier, I will say.
Yes.
And then, she again, Grover asks, where is your camera? And I think that's a really astute observation and question from Grover. Like, if you're going to be taking a picture, you're going to need a camera. Yeah. One would think. Normally, that's how it goes. At least Polaroid, something. So I think, red flag number 57, whatever we're on to right now. We get to, her saying the face is the most difficult. Can you smile for me, please, everyone? And Grover, one more time, says that sure does look like Uncle Ferdinand. And she tries to get them to look at her. She still has no camera in her hands. And finally, Annabeth says Percy, and some instinct tells him to listen to Annabeth. And he's still fighting off that sleepy feeling. Yeah. And, Annabeth says something is wrong. And Medusa hears that and says, not at all, dear. I have such noble company tonight. What could be wrong? Which is kind of letting something slip a little there. A little hint from her. And then Grover goes, that is Uncle Ferdinand. And Annabeth finally just says, look away from her, and takes her Yankees cap out, vanishes, and pushes Grover and Percy off the bench, thus saving their lives. And that was quick thinking from Annabeth, good thinking, because in that moment they hear a strange rasping sound, and the snakes are out.
Her very quick thinking in this moment absolutely saves both of their lives, because Percy's on the ground looking at Auntie M's sandals, and Grover's like scrambling off in another direction. But in this moment, like without her moving very quickly, I don't know if either of them would have.
I don't think so.
Survived.
I think they'd be statues.
Yeah, I think they would very much be statues, but without Annabeth. And because the like snakes are now fully out, and this like Percy finally really hears this like strange rasping sound. Yes, yeah. But he still hasn't put together who she is. Right. So his eyes are rising to meet her hands. And he's about to look even higher and fully turn into a statue when Annabeth screams somewhere off to his left, "No, don't." And this is where he identifies the rasping being the sound of tiny snakes, right above him from where her head would be. So he's slowly getting there.
The puzzle pieces are starting. Yeah. Also, like, why does everyone have talents? Like, I was just like, reading this description again, I'm just like, there must have been. I do know, like, sometimes I watch the PBS Eons YouTube channel, and I do know that like there was a time where like hominids were like small enough and birds were big enough that like they could swoop down and like pick you up and like eat you. Yeah. And so I'm just like, is there some kind of, I'm sure there's some kind of either like passed down mythology or maybe something in ancient Greece where like monsters need like so many of them have these talents. I'm just like, there's something there that like we're inherently afraid of as humans that we need to be telling these stories.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they are quite scary. They can do a lot of damage. Totally. But yeah. And so Grover yells run, and Percy hears him yell Maya to kickstart the flying sneakers.
He's getting better at it.
He's getting better. But Percy like can't really move. He's like frozen. Just like staring at her claws and trying to kind of fight this like grogginess that he'd been feeling. And she tries to get Percy to look up at her, saying like, "Stay with me, Percy. All you have to do is look up." And he's really fighting the urge to obey her in this moment. And instead of looking up, he very smartly looks to one side and sees one of those glass spheres that people put in gardens, a gazing ball. And he can see her reflection in that orange glass, and sees that her hair was moving, writhing like serpents. And this is where he fully puts together Auntie M, spelled E-M, is actually Auntie M with an M, and that this is Medusa.
A plus, Percy. You got there a little late, but you got there. Ding, ding, ding.
He always gets there eventually. You know, it might take him a little longer, but he gets there.
He gets there. He was paying attention somewhere in
so,
yeah.
And so he's trying to remember like how she died in the old myths, and he can kind of vaguely remember that Medusa had been asleep when his namesake Perseus had attacked him, but he's like, well, she's nowhere near being asleep, and so that's not going to be able to be my strategy this time around. And then this is where Medusa says, "The Grey-eyed one did this to me, Percy. Annabeth's mother, the cursed Athena, turned me from a beautiful woman into this." She's like, I wonder if maybe like part of her can kind of tell that Percy is like, has been feeling a lot more sympathetic towards her and like compassionate towards her. 'Cause she's really focused in on like Percy, like convincing him. Yeah. And Annabeth is shouting, "Don't listen to her, run." And it's interesting, the description is that she snarls silence at Annabeth, but then like returns to this like comforting voice to try and like kind of persuade Percy, and she even starts to say, like, you see why I must destroy the girl, Percy, she's my enemy's daughter. She's saying she's going to crush Annabeth's statue to dust, but not Percy. He doesn't need to suffer.
Because being turned into a statue is not suffering. Kind of like being smitten by not smitten. Well, I don't know the smote, whatever. Smited? Anyway, smitten by lightning or whatever. Dionysus was like, it doesn't count if you're just pulverized. So apparently, being turned into a statue doesn't hurt, but having your statue crushed would suffer. I don't know. I'm a little confused by the logic. I'm not really sure here. But the other question I have, like, in terms of connecting the dots here, because we know then that she's been communicating with and selling things to the underworld, is if in some way, like, she has any kind of orders or suggestion from Hades to stall Percy or to turn him into a statue to, like, stop him from like doing whatever he's trying to do. Now, that doesn't really help them know, like, where the Helm of Darkness is or where the, like, lightning bolt is or anything like that. So I don't know if that would be what they would want her to do, but it just makes me wonder if, like, because she knows their names already, does she know them just because, like, magic or like just being a monster? Because I don't know that we have other examples of, like, monsters just, like, knowing somebody's name, you know, for no reason at all. So it does make me wonder if either, like, a Kronos connection or a Hades connection is there in terms of, like, giving her some kind of instruction or guidance or request around the three of them. My brain was just thinking about how, like, in The Mandalorian, how every bounty hunter can, like, get like they'll, like, get a message like, oh, this person's on their
wanted,
little thing.
You know, all monsters have, there's just kind of like an email blast out to, like, okay, new demigod alert,
new demigod, like, out in the wild.
Eye out.
It does feel like that sometimes. Maybe they all have those, like, little things up with a hologram Percy just there kind of spinning around in 3D. Maybe. Before we continue on, I'm realizing the thing that I forgot to mention that's, like, very also just, like, sad about Medusa in the myth, as I remembered now, and because when she talks about Athena, is that in the myth, after Perseus, like, takes her head around, he then gives it to Athena and she puts it on her shield. Right, true.
And totally. So it's just this like horrific, like never-ending circle of violence for Medusa that's just awful. It's just really, she just, like, really never awful. Gets to rest. Like through the whole story, like, she never gets peace, she never gets rest. Like absolutely. And having her likeness used like that. And Talia's gonna have a shield. You know, like that. So well, this will come back. Around. It will. But anyways, back to this chapter. What I think is so interesting is then Medusa, after kind of, like, threatening Annabeth, and Percy's like, no, muttering, like, trying to make his leg move. She goes, do you really want to help the gods? Do you understand what awaits you on this foolish quest, Percy? What will happen if you reach the underworld? Do not be a pawn of the Olympians, my dear. And I just think that's so interesting and kind of ties back to, like, your question of, like, where is she getting her knowledge from, you know? And who is her source of information? And I think it's so interesting that she's kind of playing the, like, card of, like, you don't actually want to be on their side, don't let yourself become used by them.
Right.
Which feels like more of a, like, Kronos argument, you know? Yeah.
And, like, who knows that Percy's been sent on a quest? Luke, you know? So it's kind of interesting, like, how is this information traveling, and what is the purpose, you know, of it? And I don't know exactly how this fits into, like, the big plan of, like, Kronos' big plan and all of this, but it does strike me as just, like, interesting to think about how she gets her information here. And I think it's like effective, even if Percy's gonna end up seeing her as, like, someone to fight and kill, that like her words are going to swim in his head later in this chapter. And so it's sort of reinforcing this sort of like there's a core seed of truth to the critique that we keep talking about, like around these Olympian gods, and that that's going to simmer in Percy for quite a while, and this is just adding to that.
Yeah. And he already feels like, we had that part in the previous chapter where he already feels like he is a pawn, like he's being used by his dad, because he is.
Totally.
And so it's a very, like, she's actually making a very sound argument.
Yes. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, she's making a good point. She's got a point.
Yeah. And then we get Grover's like big hero moment, which I love that he gets this. He yells Percy, and behind Percy he can hear this buzzing sound like 200-pound humming, like a 200-pound hummingbird in a nosedive. And Grover yells duck. And Percy turns, and there he sees Grover in the night sky, flying in from 12 o'clock with his winged shoes fluttering, and Grover's holding a tree branch the size of a baseball bat, but his eyes are shut tight so that he doesn't get turned into a statue, and he's navigating by his ears and his nose alone. And impressive. He actually gets like quite a few like whacks in before she knocks him out of the sky. And so I especially like when he yells that was for Uncle Ferdinand, like I love for many reasons, I love that he gets a hero moment after he was like trying to communicate like, hey, we shouldn't be here.
Totally.
Really, like this is to your point of like, when do they each step into these like leader roles? Like this feels like a moment where Grover finally really steps into that like leader role of he's taking initiative.
And they're like listening to him, and he's got a plan. And I love that he's using a tree branch because all like nature vibes, you know. And of all the people, like he has the best senses for this, because he could hear the hissing before anybody else. Before the snakes were out. He obviously has a really good sense of smell, and so for him to be the one to do this, like plus the shoes, it makes so much sense. And it's like really interesting for the shoes, which are sent on like a treacherous purpose, to actually play a really useful role here and potentially save their lives. So it's also kind of interesting, like if Kronos did in any way influence Medusa, he also provided the team with one of the tools they used to ultimately defeat her.
Yeah, he did. And as we'll kind of find out in the next chapter, like her store became kind of like a trap for a lot of satyrs who got their searcher's license and like went on their own quest to find Pan. And so it's like Grover's able to get justice not just for his Uncle Ferdinand, but then also for like all of the many satyrs before him who got turned into statues and never made it out of Jersey on their quest to find Pan.
Which we love that for Grover. This is heroic Grover. And we love when he shows up. Grover's like thwacking Medusa, I think probably like in the head or wherever. It doesn't say specifically. And Annabeth comes up right next to Percy and says Percy, but she's still invisible. So he jumps so high that he nearly clears a garden gnome, and he's like, geez, don't do that. And so she takes her cap off to become visible again and tells him that he has to cut her head off. And he's like, what? Are you crazy? Like, we just need to get out of here. And Annabeth says some things with some kind of like, I would say like malice in her like perspective. She's like, Medusa's a menace, she's evil, I'd kill her myself, but... And then it says, Annabeth swallowed as if she were about to make a difficult admission, and says, but you've got the better weapon. And also says, besides, I'd never get close to her. She'd slice me to bits because of my mother. She says that Percy has a chance both because he's a son of Poseidon, so he can get physically closer to Medusa, and also he has a better weapon. He has a sword, which is a longer, pointier thing than a knife is. Yep, absolutely. If you're going for a head, like, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so Annabeth grabs a gazing ball from a nearby pedestal and gives it to him. And this is where she has a funny moment where she's like, a polished shield would be better. The convexity will cause some distortion. The reflection size should be off by a factor. And she's kind of going down mental super train math of like brain. Super math brain, like, and in trying to be very helpful, like trying to communicate to him, like, it's going to look off and by this factor, and so you need to like take that into account because what you're seeing is not going to be like a true exact mirror that and you can
Percy's
follow.
Like, will you speak English please? Just like regular plain English. And she's like, I am, because to her, like, this is just like normal logical stuff. And then she's like, okay, just look at her in the glass, never look at her directly, which I feel like, yes, that's the reason you're handing me a glass. Like, this was the extra tidbits. I think were a little unnecessary, Annabeth. We got this.
And Grover yells, hey guys, I think she's unconscious, but then Medusa kind of gives a roar and Grover's like, well, maybe not. And he goes in for another pass with a tree branch, and Annabeth is like, look, Grover's got a great nose, but eventually he's going to crash. Basically, like, you got to go now because we can't keep up this for too much longer. And so Percy takes Riptide out, uncaps the pen, and he's like following the sounds while keeping his eyes locked on the gazing ball so that he'd only see the reflection when it shows up and not the real thing. Grover like is coming in for another turn, but he flies in a little too low, so Medusa's able to grab the stick, pull him off course, and he tumbles through the air and crashes into the arms of a stone grizzly bear.
Poor bear.
Yeah.
Sad face.
And Medusa's about to lunge at him, and Percy yells, hey, a very classic, I feel like, one in general, like, it's kind of a classic, like, distraction, like, hey, over here. Yeah. But it does also feel very, like, Percy, you know, to do that. Totally. To just kind of be like, no.
Hey.
Hey.
Well, and especially because, like, you know, his friend just, like, crashed into a grizzly bear, and I feel like he's gonna want, like, Grover's in a vulnerable position now that he's fallen, and I think Percy's gonna want to, like, take charge there, and and he advances on her, which isn't easy because he's holding a sword and a glass ball, which you think about that and you're like, that does feel extremely awkward. And I don't know how heavy this glass ball is, but some of them could be quite heavy. And I do think that this is like a pretty difficult way to fight. Like, I don't think they practice this in the sword fighting arena. No. Like, they gotta add this to the curriculum. And he's able to see the reflection of her face and has some rude things to say about it. And it seems like the way that the snakes are moving is kind of creating like green spirals in the glass. Yeah. Which I feel like makes total sense, right? Like, you've got the curvature that Annabeth was talking about, and then you've got like movement. And so that does seem like it would be really hard to pinpoint like where the face actually is within all of that, you know? And so then she tries just, you know, again to like, you know, appeal to his compassion or, you know, to his humanity, be like, you wouldn't harm an old woman, Percy. I know you wouldn't. And that does make him hesitate. Though, you know, she also has some really intense eyes that are looking at him at this moment. And Grover moans, Percy, don't listen to her. And Medusa says, too late, lunges with her talons, which how many times, you know how you can like track how many times something is said in a book? I want to know how many times it's like, lunged at Percy with her talons. Like, that happens so many times. He must be like, oh, I'm so tired of this. Talons. Why did it have to be talons? Like,
well, and so far it's always the like women monsters who have the talons. Like, you know,
well,
the Furies.
You know, I don't know. We got there's nails and things. Yeah, probably.
But it's like, you know, I don't know if we'll ever. It does seem something. I think it's probably ties back to like very stereotypical depictions of like witches and other things that are associated much more like stereotypically with women. But yeah, it is like there's a lot of talons coming at Percy.
There's a lot of talents. There's too many talons. That's it's one of the things in this book. Too many talons, and Percy is just having to deal with another set of talons, and it's almost kind of like the Mrs. Dodds moment at the beginning where he's having to kind of go on instinct, right? Like he isn't able to like put up a correct stance and like use the stuff that Luke's taught him or things like that. Like he is just slashing his sword up, and it's kind of like when he does that with Mrs. Dodds where we're kind of hoping for the best here. Like we've done our best that we can, but we're hoping for the best. And he does hear a sickening schlock, which is a great word, I feel like. Schlock. And a hiss like wind rushing out of the cavern, the sound of a monster disintegrating, and something falls to the ground next to his foot. And it took all his willpower not to look because he could feel the warm ooze soaking into his sock and little dying snake heads tugging at his shoelaces, which sounds extremely uncomfortable, and I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't want to experience that. But yeah, we have our next monster kill from Percy Jackson.
Yeah, and our second technical team up of the trio kind of taking on a monster. This one though was more like organized and purposeful. Like they were on the same page a little bit more about it versus what the Furies on the bus. Like I think there was more like Annabeth just wanted Percy to run. Percy kind of started the battle to try and save them, whereas this was more like everyone's kind of on the same page about like, okay, the plan is to fight our way out of this and not try to like run our way out of this.
And kind of doing their part with their different skills and magical items and stuff like that. Yep.
And so Annabeth comes up and she's like, don't move. And she very, very carefully, without looking down, like wraps up Medusa's head so that they're not worried about being turned into stone anymore. And Annabeth, her voice trembling, asks, "Are you okay?" And Percy replies, "Yeah," though he felt like throwing up his double cheeseburger. Understandably.
Valid.
And he asks, why didn't the head evaporate? And Annabeth explains, once you sever it, it becomes a spoil of war, same as your Minotaur horn. But don't unwrap the head, it can still petrify you, which is how it is in the original myths.
Yes. And also key information for what Percy will eventually do with this. So it's a good thing that he gets to know this.
And so Grover comes down from the grizzly statue, and he's got a big welt on his forehead, and his cap is just hanging from one of his little goat horns, and the fake feet have been knocked off, so the magic sneakers are just kind of flying aimlessly around his head. Like everyone's disheveled and banged up.
Yes. Post monster fight. Aftermath.
Yes.
Yep.
But Percy tells him he did a good job, because he did. And he manages a bashful grin, but he's like, that was not fun.
No. He says the hitting her with the stick part is fun, but the overall that it's not fun.
Yes. And so they kind of regroup a little bit. He gets his shoes out of the air. Percy recaps the sword, and they stumble back to the warehouse, and they find some old plastic grocery bags and kind of double wrap her head. And they just all kind of sit around it. And for a moment or two tired to speak, but then Percy finally says, so we have Athena to thank for this monster. And Annabeth gets very irritated and annoyed, and I think also very defensive. And I think we'll see this a lot throughout the books. She is very quick to become defensive of Athena and stand up for her. Kind of just always very quickly, very immediately.
Yeah,
she has
Annabeth,
a lot of loyalty towards her.
She doesn't seem to have some of the same reservations or frustrations with the gods that some of the other characters have. Like, she would not be a good candidate for Kronos. No. And I think, you know, even though, like, she's been through a lot, I do think that, like, I think she likes order, right? And she likes systems and she likes structure. And so I think that, like, for her to have all of this, like, system make sense in a certain way, or, like, be bought into it, it kind of tracks, you know, for who she is as a person and, like, her mentality. And also that, like, for her, like, her godly parent has actually probably seemed overall more interested in her, or you know, than her mortal parent.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, like, I think there is also a little bit of an element of sometimes, like, when you're young, if you have, like, a parent who is around but, like, screwing up, and a parent who isn't really around.
Yeah.
Like, it's easier to be more mad at the parent who is around and is screwing things up than it is to be at the parent who isn't around.
The one who drops by and gives, like, you a present every once in a while. Yeah.
Who basically just, like, isn't around enough to screw up, you know, because they are, you know, stop by, like, once a year. And so I think it does also feel like there's a little bit of a layer of that as well that, like, adds to her, like, loyalty to Athena, because it's like, oh, well, she hasn't screwed up in the way that my dad did. And it's like, well, but she also wasn't around to screw up, you know,
which is a form of screwing up, but it's just very passive.
Yeah,
for sure. That's a good point.
So then Percy and Annabeth kind of have this, like, back and forth, because after Annabeth gets defensive, Percy's like, well, so it's my fault, and they just, like, They go back and forth a little bit, kind of getting annoyed at each other. And Grover interrupts the both of them and goes, you two are giving me a migraine, and satyrs don't even get migraines.
Which is so funny.
Yeah, which is very funny. And Grover kind of brings them back to the important thing at hand, which is, what are we going to do with her head?
With the head.
And Percy's staring at it. He's seeing one little snake hanging out of a hole in the plastic, and the words printed on the side of the bag said, we appreciate your business. And he starts to get angry at the gods all over again, just, like, frustrated with them for the whole quest, that the gods got them blown off the road, that they've been in 2 major fights their very first day out of camp. And he remembers what Medusa said, do not be a pawn of the Olympians, my dear, you would be better off as a statue. And he gets an idea. And he goes in the back of the warehouse till he finds Medusa's office, and he finds her account book, which this is incredibly smart thinking. He sees that her 6 most recent sales were all shipments to the underworld to decorate Hades and Persephone's garden. And so he gets the actual address, which is DOA Recording Studios, West Hollywood, California. And I'm just going to say, it took me a very long time, an embarrassingly long amount of time to understand the DOA joke.
Yeah.
It took me a very, very long time to understand.
It's a good joke.
It's a great joke. And when it finally clicked, I was like, that's a really good joke, and I fully have missed it this entire time.
That's so funny. I was like, nice, a clue, because it's like, you know, and like whenever you're on an adventure, it's like you're trying to, you know, they kind of know where they're going, but your every little mini side quest is like maybe giving you a piece of information.
Yes,
like, a clue. Totally. We have done it. It's a good thing he goes back there.
So he, like, takes that bill, stuffs it in his pocket, so he's got the address, and he, like, rummages around for some money, finds $20, some golden drachmas, and some packing slips for Hermes' overnight express. Rummages around, finds the right size box. He goes back to the picnic table, and he packs up Medusa's head and fills out a delivery slip to the gods, Mount Olympus, 600th floor, Empire State Building, New York. And I love that it's with best wishes, Percy Jackson.
Know.
It's incredible to add, not just like Percy Jackson, but with best wishes.
The snark,
I think, is just
the snark
amazing.
Level is optimal. It is prime. Also, like, where has he heard with best wishes? Like, I just love that he's even encountered at this age the phrase with best wishes. Like, I'm not even sure if I think Sally's writing that on anything, you know what I mean? So I just, it's so funny. It's kind of like when he calls one of his teachers an old sot or whatever, like, he pulls out this sort of like old-fashioned language from somewhere. I feel like he's got some reservoir that he can pull from that's like, oh, this is how one would speak, and we're just like, this is hilarious.
I know. He gets like so old school petty at times, does, and it's so funny and it's wonderful. So funny. And I love it. And so Grover warns that they're not going to like that. He says they'll think you're impertinent, and Percy like pours the golden drachmas into the pouch. The package disappears with a pop, and he goes, "I am impertinent."
I know, I love that.
I feel like sounding very impertinent when he says, like, "Yes, I am impertinent."
I'm like, same, relatable. I love it.
And he looks at Annabeth, daring her to criticize, which I think is very interesting. He's kind of like, okay, say something. Like,
say let me see. What you got?
Yep. But she doesn't like criticize or really say anything about it. She just seemed resigned to the fact that Percy had a major talent for ticking off the gods, and she just mutters, "Come on, we need a new plan."
Yeah.
And that is where the chapter
classic
ends.
Athena child. We need a new plan.
Yep. We just, okay, fine, you did something that I think I don't agree with, but we just need a new plan. We just got to figure this out.
And I feel like this is one of the only chapters so far that hasn't ended on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, no, that's true. It ends on them being like safe after this fight, and in a place where they kind of have a minute to genuinely like regroup for a second, which they will. Like, they will like regroup a bit, and kind of like try and figure out their next plan and their next steps.
Yeah, and I think it kind of reminds me of like when we're finally kind of settled at, we do have some cliffhangers at Camp Half-Blood, but you know, these sort of touch points of like, okay, we've gone through this really intense, accelerated period of battles and excitement and car chases and whatever, and then so we're gonna land, and then there's mysteries and there's things and there's more monsters, and now we're on the quest and it's exciting and we're going and now we'll land. And I do think it like helps when you're in an adventure book to like have those moments, and also sometimes that's like when you have good conversations and stuff like that, like we've had before. So it makes sense that it's time for that. And I do love that we end on this impertinent, spicy moment from Percy Jackson. I also like, for me, just because like I really love, as I've said, Gabe's comeuppance, I'm like, I'm tracking the moments where we're like headed in that direction, and so I'm just like, okay, all right, cool, it's off. We're getting there. So that feels good that we've initiated the start of that revenge.
Count your days, Gabe. Count your days.
Yep. We'll hear from him a few more times, but it's the path has been set in a way. So you know, I feel like this was a really action-packed chapter, but in a way that it's very contained to like one like warehouse, like one little area, which is like kind of interesting. Like, a lot is happening in a very small space, you know. And I really like tracing kind of like we talked about at the beginning, just like the team dynamic and how that's, you know, because we talked about before, like Grover and Percy already have an established rapport and friendship, and so like Annabeth and Grover have one, and so it's like Annabeth and Percy are trying to figure out their relationship, are set up Romeo and Juliet style to like supposed to be enemies, and Annabeth's really bought into this, and you know, now they're kind of like unpacking who they are as individuals beyond who their parents are, and starting to learn about each other and confronting myths that have to do with their parents. And so I think we're off to an interesting start. We've had some vulnerability from Annabeth. We've had some like compassion and reassurance from Percy. We've had arguments from both of them multiple times. We're like, it's all part of that like forming a relationship and a friendship under, extreme duress, like under, starving and adventuring and almost being killed multiple times kind of circumstances. And that's going to kind of forge you in fire in a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, any final thoughts?
I had a question that I wish I had looked up prior to us starting the episode, but I did not think of it before the episode. But it hit me while we were reading, because when Percy was walking with that orb and looking look at Medusa through that, it was making me think of the basilisk in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And then it made me curious about what is the link between snakes and petrification or being turned, with Medusa it's turned to stone. With the basilisk it was their
I have a guess.
Oh, go for it. Yes.
Well, you know how I was talking about the sort of ancient history of big birds and humans. There's also this really well documented history of kind of an arms race between snakes and primates throughout history, from my understanding. And so there's a really strong link in why as humans we might have a reaction to snakes or snake-like things, and also other animals obviously other mammals and things like that, but that specifically primates and snakes were in some kind of evolutionary arms race against each other.
Interesting.
What it makes me think of, I particularly kind of have a phobia of snakes, and so I experience a strong freeze response when I see a snake or a snake-like object, and I wonder if there is something to having a freeze response, because with fight, flight, and freeze, obviously it's an automatic reaction that we can't control, and so I'm sure different humans or primates would have a different reaction to a snake, but I just wonder if it has been a common experience throughout human history to have a freeze response when seeing a snake, because you see something and you freeze and you're trying to check out, is it a snake? Am I scared? What is that?
Right.
And that maybe that was translated into mythology.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was wondering, are there, snakes whose venom can have, a paralytic effect?
I'm sure there are, because that could also be part of it.
They're also maybe then that being translated to, not just from, a snake bite, but then, looking into the eyes. Because it really hit me. I was like, oh, these two, maybe it's just a coincidence, but it feels like it isn't. And it made me curious about other depictions of snake or snake-like beings with any sort of ability that's kind of freezing, whether that's just freezing you for a moment or permanently turning into stone or freezing permanently or what have you.
There are definitely poisons that have paralytic properties. I'm pretty sure snakes have them, because I think that helps them swallow the prey,
right.
So,
yeah.
What I'm hearing is that we have research to do on both gnome mythology, and snakes, and we need to report back to the people with the research, the super thorough research you have come to expect from this podcast.
Incredibly thorough, detailed
Google searches. But I've written this down. We're gonna take a look. We're gonna let you know what we find. That's a good point. I'm curious about that too.
Yeah. Otherwise, we're just kind of really now in the meat of the quest. We are on it.
Yep.
Officially.
Yes. It's really officially started now.
This was day one of the quest, and we are just the train has left the station. We are on it.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get off till the end.
Almost, but yes.
Yes, almost. There will be a train that will. Yes. Yeah.
But metaphorically, yes. Awesome. Well, then I am excited for next time when we read a wonderfully named chapter. Chapter 12, we get advice from a poodle. Bye.
Bye.